All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Dance Studio Network podcast. I am your host, Jonathan Chatham, and joining me today on this beautiful, finally fall-ish day in Texas, we have the amazing, talented, and wonderful Miss Cassie Dyson joining us on the show today. So I'm really pumped to get you on here. First and foremost, we have got to know each other for over a decade plus now. Yes. So we've done some life together, done lots of life, but you got incredible story, great journey. And so I just kind of want to jump into it for all of our dancers out there, and let's get rolling. So awesome. Getting started into dance, what was the age that it all began?
Yeah, so I grew up in a dance studio. It was a much smaller studio than what we have with the Dance Studio Network. But I got started when I was about 2 and a half in my first little pre-class. And I mean, I think it was almost instantaneous. Like, I just loved it from the beginning and was at the studio as much as I could all growing up. And so that was kind of my first, introduction into dance.
Just gravitated towards it.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So, one of the earliest dancers we've had on the show, for sure. I always some people start later, some start younger, but, watching you as a person, dance is a part of your being. So, it's so hard. It's so infectious when you spend time in the room with you or watching how you teach kids. But when you were young, you got started too. And then where did it kind of lead from there? Yeah.
So I was heavily drawn to ballet. To start with. So I grew up doing the Nutcracker. Yeah. It was a small studio. So I was in almost every single role.
Oh, okay.
In the Nutcracker. I was Clara for a few years. Awesome. And had the opportunity to do some of the more advanced roles too. But then I ended up moving from Abilene to Allen, which was such a culture change for me, from Little West, Texas city to the big city. And during that transition, I started to gravitate more away from ballet, more to jazz, hip hop, all of kind of the fun styles, and made my way into the drill world with Talonets at Allen High School, and was really excited for kind of that opportunity to invest into.
So when you kind of go into those early years, and this is kind of like the discovery years, you're kind of fighting what it is that really, resonates with yourself. So, when you got to 8, 9, 10, was that kind of the transition, going towards more of that jazz, did you feel like? Or, you were still doing a lot of ballet. If you're in the Nutcracker, you lots and lots of ballet.
I did. So I was just so heavily involved with ballet. I went to ballet intensives.
Very good.
Once I was about 12 and 13. So I was going, with several week-long intensives, 3 week longs. I was going to Jackson, Mississippi to Ballet Magnificat's ballet intensive. So I was very, very heavily involved. Yeah. But I also, the trajectory of a professional ballet dancer's life, it was starting to kind of unfold for me, looking ahead. And I was not as excited about that. That didn't intrigue me as much. Moving into that more professional world, just knowing the intensity of that life. And as much as I loved it, I wanted to explore more. Yeah. And so, I felt like I could adapt really easily to the other styles of dance. Yeah. With hip hop and jazz and tap. I loved it all. So I wanted to just see what else was out there and what was available.
Well, now your mom watched you kind of go through this change. So what was that type of interaction when you're kind of all right, I love ballet, Mom, but maybe I'm really interested in jazz and hip hop. How did she kind of come into that picture a little bit?
Well, it's interesting. I would attend, and I think this is awesome. The high school in Abilene would have mini camps for the drill team girls, the high school girls, to host camps for younger girls to come in. I know that several of the high schools here do that same kind of junior camp, mini camp. And it's such an incredible experience to go and get to dance with the older girls, right? And so my mom always put me in those workshops to go and experience, like, what is it like to be dancing, but in a different element. And so she was very supportive of, really whatever direction I wanted to pursue.
That's awesome.
With that. Yes, I know.
That's really great.
Yeah. And I say this so much to dancers, like, there's not a one size fits all pathway. For someone who loves the ballet pathway, I mean, it could change at some point, and that is okay. It's okay to have new interests, or for different interests in dance to start to develop. And it's not wrong. If anything, I think it's better to explore what that is and see if it is an opportunity that, something like, wow, this is really something I love. Yeah. I love even more.
Yeah. Well, it's like a revealing, like, here you are, this young person, you're looking around, you're seeing all these things, and until you really discover, what type of artist you are, or what that pull is on your heart, like, it's okay. Like, keep expanding that experience. So I love to hear that, like, your mom was really supportive in that process, because that can be hard. Sometimes you kind of, as a parent, like, oh, I thought, my kid's going one way, and all of a sudden they went another. But like, that is the nature of watching your children grow up before you as a parent. And like, for you as a young student, this is your opportunity to find your way. And obviously it turned out, we'll get to that part in a minute, but it turned out beautifully, the direction you went. And it's like, I can't imagine now, like, knowing you, like, had you went maybe the ballet route,
right?
Just because of the way your personality is, the way your energy is, like, it feels like you were made for this type of style. And that's fun to be able to, like, watching kids where you can kind of see it too, right? Yeah. You're like, oh man, this kid is like really leaning towards, like lyrical contemporary, like that passion and love to storytell and really express yourself. And other kids are like, I want that sassy jazz. Like, I want to bring that funkiness, like, bring it into the studio. We'll shape it the right way, know? And then for those that really love the ballet direction, it's very, very intentional with every part of your body. Yeah. And so for those that are like A-types, great for ballet, right? Because they're like, perfect structure. I know exactly what I need. And then you're like hip hop, like improv. You're like, like, it's terrifying, like, what do I do? What do I do with my hands? No, like, it's a lot. But kind of going through those young years, and then kind of getting into like the teenage years. Yeah. Maybe what was kind of your inspiration to keep going?
So once my family moved, it was really difficult, actually. I was starting high school. I had made the drill team. I was thrilled about that. I had so much dance history leading up to that. So I felt like I was coming in very equipped for what I, wanted to achieve in that space. But I was not able to really find a studio locally that would support that direction.
Like going like the drill. Yeah, this is common, you know, like for people out there, like it's hard, studios trying to take you one way and drill might lead you another, but like finding that bridge that brings both.
Absolutely. And I, I went and tried different studios locally and struggled to find somewhere that would allow me to take advanced technical classes that was going to support what I was doing in drill without requiring that I would be on some kind of company for their studio. Yeah. And one of the things of coming back, to this area and being here, I want to help to bridge that gap too. Yeah. And thankfully I think it's becoming more common to see, and I'm so thankful for that, for the dancers here, to find support and exploring those different routes. That might not be as traditional as like just as a studio competitive team. Yeah.
Team
route.
Dancer. Yeah. And I mean, obviously that's really what, it's interesting to hear this. It's kind of like you really got the chance to kind of give what you didn't get as a teacher, and
absolutely.
That's important. Kids need to have that community and support, and like, being a dance teacher is such a high level of mentorship. You know, these kids look up to you. They follow you. Nowadays, social media, they know what's
Right.
going on with everything,
Yeah.
you know, like anything you post, they will see, you know, like, so represent yourself well and,
Yeah.
and make sure you're leading the next generation in a positive forum and use social media, you know, in a good way instead of, you know, a lot of the other ways it can go. So that's neat. So it's really cool to kind of know that, you know, that kind of the splinter in the road was, you know, not being able to have it as a young person, but now as an adult, like you're able to provide that to the next generation.
Yeah.
And so, all right. So moving through high school, so you went to, which high school did you go to?
Allen High School.
Allen High School. Whoop, whoop. You all out there? Incredible program. I mean, gosh, all their stuff out
It's
there
just
is
huge.
It's just huge.
Yeah.
I mean, the teams, everything. It's amazing. And for you who don't know, like it's one high school for the whole city of Allen.
Yes.
So just expect.
And it just keeps growing
Yeah.
too. So
It feels like a college experience almost when you go there.
and there are even college classes on campus. I mean, it is.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a huge, almost institution,
Mm-hmm.
and very developed. And again, I was very fortunate to be able to be in a program that was developed and growing.
Yeah.
And so I was a drill team member for
How many
all
years?
all
4 years?
Mm-hmm.
And then what was your rank in that?
So I served as a junior lieutenant.
Okay.
So my junior year was an officer on the officer line, and then my senior year, I was captain for the team.
Yeah.
And the squad at that time was very large. It was about 80 members.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. That's a big team. That's a lot of competition though, too.
Yes.
So,
and just you know, I always knew that I wanted to step into that role with a leadership mentality of the team, put the team before myself. So I feel like that was one thing that always helped me.
say that again. Put the what?
Put the team before myself.
Oh, there's the golden nugget. Leaders are often selfless.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that was the thing that really, because there were 3 other junior lieutenants with me who we were all auditioning for that captain spot.
Oh yeah.
And I know for a fact, like, they were strong competition for, I mean, really. And in a way, like, I would have been thrilled just to be on the officer line and serving alongside them in whatever capacity that was. But I think that's a part of it, is remembering to stay humble in those moments, that it's not about you. It truly is about what is going to be the best in that next season.
Well, it's like if you're going to take that point of leadership, you're still working with all those girls you're competing with. So like making sure you don't burn that bridge trying to reach that goal. Like, who's going to follow you if you mistreated them or you talk down or gossip behind their back? Like, that's not going to serve you at all.
Absolutely.
And, you know, that's the professionalism that leaders typically take in any industry I meet. It's like, oh man, they could jump into the weeds with the rest of them, but they choose not to because they're like, all that does is devalue my character.
Right.
And as a young person, you're supposed to grow your character, develop, persevere, you know, become that, you know, person that you want to be instead of, you know, be common like everybody else and talk down to everybody else. And so it's neat to hear that obviously that came to you at a young age.
Yes. Yeah. And I think I had a really good set of mentorship, leaders in my life that allowed me to really understand that early on. But it always felt very innate for me too.
Yeah.
Like I just knew, like, I don't ever want to elevate myself by pushing somebody else down, because that ultimately is not going to help anybody.
Gee, logic. It's so true though.
But we see it so often when people wanting to get ahead by cutting somebody else down. I mean, we see that a lot in different ways. And I want to encourage anyone who might feel like that's what they need to do to stay focused. Like, you know what? Stay focused on your path. Like I said, no path is the same for anybody.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, the hard part is learning how to cope with defeat. So like, is there a moment where like, man, you felt really beat down, but like you kind of pulled yourself together and And I mean, of course there is. There's hundreds of those micro moments, right, in all of our lives that maybe it's not televised or seen, but those are the difference makers, those moments. So like, you audition for a role that you didn't get, how do you respond post that?
It's so interesting that you bring it up. I actually did not face really a huge heartbreak of like any kind of defeat until I was older.
Interesting.
And in some ways I feel like that was a detriment.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because I was not familiar with like, how do I handle this?
Yeah.
I mean, it was almost difficult, but also I had walked alongside other friends who had faced that too.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to be that person, but then also to be alongside somebody too, and showing grace and love still in those situations. But I do think that, not getting a role or failing, which is
quote
subjective,
unquote
failing is not actually failing. It's taking an experience to learn from and to grow from, so that you're better equipped for whatever that next step is. And sometimes, I mean, I just don't want to get all philosophical here, but
no, let it all out.
But sometimes, there are things that are happening beyond our control. Like if a role doesn't work out for you, you don't know what other opportunity is going to come knocking that wouldn't be available to you should you have been in
that said role.
Other role. And so, the example I was speaking of was, whenever I was on Dallas Cowboys, I did not make my second year back, and it was such a, such a like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
I really was. I had been on a team for 7 years straight, some form of a team. And that was a lot of my direction and where my focus was. And so then not to have that, there was a big question mark.
There's those moments. And I think that what you're pointing out is really important for parents to understand. Like, the safest place for your kid to fail in life is when they're under your protection.
Absolutely.
And not to protect them from failing,
right,
but to learn how to like encourage them to get back up and not let that failure define you, let it refine you.
Yes.
And, that's something that's been innate with me. Like, making a mistake is statistically it's going to happen. Things are not going to work out perfectly, but like, what do you do with that?
Yes.
Do you let it defeat you, or do you let it like invigorate you? And so when you went from, I'll roll back a little bit.
Yeah.
So you graduated at Allen, and then where did you go next?
I went to Kilgore College.
Kilgore,
Yes.
Rangerette. Oh
Yes.
man. And how many years there?
So 2 years. It's a junior college, a junior college experience, but with so much enrichment through
There's a lot of
Rangerettes.
tradition and history too.
Yes.
From that, and those are like lifelong friendships.
Yes.
That you develop.
And it's just such an incredible. I mean, we call it Rhettland. Like you're in a bubble almost. You live in a dorm and with all of the Rangerettes. The sophomores are on the second floor. The freshmen are on the first floor. There's a hierarchy there. There's a lot of, like you said, tradition there. And that is really where the whole drill team world was.
It's kind of like reaching the apex of like the drill world.
And so you get dancers from not just Texas, from all over the country that are coming to audition for,
so that competition circle just opened up huge to get into there. Yeah.
And I will say most of the dancers are from Texas just because this is kind of the hub.
More familiar.
Yeah.
But well, and again, that program has its own intensity. And so it's kind of like if we're watching, your history of like where you started as a young one, kind of growing up, finding your way, then working in high school, getting more solidified, and then you took that leap to go to Kilgore. And what's one of your favorite memories out there?
Oh my goodness.
I mean, I know there's a lot, but yeah.
Well, I think it was just being at Revels, which is the spring show that the Rangerettes host or put on, and host a lot of other high high school drill teams to come and watch and see the show.
Yeah.
It is kind of crazy to go from, because I had attended Revels as a high schooler, and I had even thought like I would never do this. I mean, it's like
the never say never thing, right? Everybody's got one of those moments.
And I was like, I would never come here. And then I think it was my senior year, during my senior year in high school, I was like, I have no idea really where I'm going or what I'm doing, and I don't know. It just like it hit me like, why not try out for the Rangerettes? Yeah. And so then to be, my freshman Revels, but then especially sophomore Revels. Yeah. Was amazing. But also to that, I was an officer. I was the right middle lieutenant for my sophomore year. Okay. With the Rangerettes, and that was super. I mean, what a honor, to get to be in that position. And so just the weight of responsibility there too, just knowing that I'm carrying this legacy on, the tradition on, and all the batons had names. Yeah. And so like my baton was called Shiny, and it was like the shiniest of the batons, but they all have names, and it's just interesting. Like, again, the tradition, there's so, down to like the tiniest detail,
like super intentional,
like where your belt is supposed to,
where it's placed,
like where
across
it's placed,
your stomach,
the straps across the belt, like for the red, white, and blue uniform. You have the red shirt and the blue skirt, and the white is supposed to perfectly in the middle cross over, and so you're supposed to see a little square of red and a little square of blue underneath. It's just very, very meticulous.
So like in everything.
The details.
Yeah, and I go like, that's a disciplining and a structure that you're creating a habit of. Yeah. And when did you feel like in Kilgore, like it just became part of your lifestyle?
Yeah. And it,
because you are very meticulous to this day, like even working years. Like, hey, I got the document. I put it in perfectly. Everything is A to Z, like perfectly right, and it's funny because you work with creatives that you don't always get that response. Sometimes it's all over the map, and that's normal. Yeah. But that's interesting, understanding that that's where it drew from. And then, okay, so you finished Kilgore, and then when did you go for the big old Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders? What was the year, first of all, so everybody knows? When did you?
2011.
2011.
I just finished at Kilgore College, and I was transferred back to the Metroplex. Really, okay. Knew I was going to be attending Texas Women's University, and I just was interested in pursuing, what's the next step from here. And I immediately went to the Cowboys audition. Really? Not expecting to even, I don't know. I think in my head, I was like, I would love to make a few rounds and see how it goes. Was shocked to, after the first round, I was like, that was so fun. Yeah. Yes. This is great. I'm learning so much. I'm meeting great people. And then I made it to semifinals and then to finals. And
how many so people know, like how many cuts are there in making the team?
So
roughly,
there's the freestyle round, and then you have the choreography. I speak in dance terms, right? The choreography round, and then they bring in the veterans, and so then that's the finals. So there's kind of like 3 cuts there.
3 cuts worth. Oh man!
And then from finals, they announce the training camp candidates, the girls to come in to train over the summer, and then there's still cuts to be made.
Still made all the way through the training. Yeah, man, and that's heartbreak. Because like you go through all that and then, so you made the 2011 and your first year. What was it like putting on those boots for the first time?
It was so surreal. I still felt, I had a lot of imposter syndrome, feeling like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Yeah. Really the fake it till you make it, like a mantra. I was like, I am faking it like in every possible way. I felt like, Yeah. But I feel like that is something to recognize too, is that even if and when you are making it to those places, you can still doubt and question.
Have some insecurities along the way.
Yeah.
And that's positive, I think, for these young girls to understand, like for us to build a better mental health in this generation that's coming up, like to see the glitz, the glam, the amazing Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, you think you've got everything put together, and behind that perfect outfit and choreography and all that hard work that goes into it, there's still a lot of insecurities and things to work through, and you're just people at the end of the day who are, fighting to figure it out, right?
Yes, everybody is. Yeah. And so, the first time I'm like going to an appearance and signing autographs, I'm like, you want my autograph?
Did you get that kind of like that little bit of like that fame? Because it's huge. There's people who like start from like when they're young that are like, that's all I want to be.
Right.
And I know this is kind of something you fell into.
Yeah.
And so that must have been hard, right? To kind of like flip the switch from like, I'm a dancer to then like, I'm kind of a celebrity style dancer, right?
Yes. And my family, we've been Cowboys fans. And so
Go Cowboys.
Cheering for the Cowboys was not something that was really new for me.
Yeah.
But definitely like stepping into, like you said, that role. I mean, there are super fans. Like there are, super fans for the Cowboys and for the Cowboys cheerleaders even. And so it was definitely, I would say my personality too, even though I have a bubbly personality, I'm still a little more on the reserved side. And so, especially like in that kind of like public context, I was definitely more on the shy end.
Interesting.
Of that.
Yeah. Well, it's overwhelming, to be thrust into the spotlight and that type of nature. And for the DCC, they're very meticulous. This is why they're America's, their most sought after cheerleading group across the country. You talk about Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders and it's like, what? Who was on that? It's big time. But the level of meticulous, walk people through that a little bit, the amount of practices and times. And I mean, there's a lot of requirements of if you're going to represent our brand, this is how we expect you to look. So walk me through kind of that behind the scenes, if you will.
Well, and one of the good things, so as a dancer, your resume continues to build as you acquire, different experiences. So even if you don't fully make it, all the way through, even just getting an invitation into training camp is still like a huge honor.
Yeah.
But I just say that because the steps I took, which really were not strategic on my end. It was more of like, I just want to continue pursuing more. Going from talonets at Allen High School to rangerettes. There's just a level of discipline. We talked about discipline and accountability. So it goes beyond just learning the dance. It's about really upholding all of the professionalism beyond that. And so I think that's super important, especially for on the parent side of things, just to be intentional in helping your dancer become accountable in those ways.
So, learning how to think for yourself, take care of yourself, and obviously growing from young student to young adult, growing in the professional world of dance, like there's no one looking over your shoulder going like, hey, remember, right? Like you've already got to have that together. So this is why I believe it's so important that kids have got to fail when they're young so they can learn how they can grow and do things better and take that, like self-accountability, and for mom and dad to do it for you. And it's great to have mom and dad's help, but I'm a big believer in like letting kids experience their experience. Yeah. And then trying to coach them through the success or coach them through the failing, like both are equal as important. But you did let the cat out of the bag. So you made the first year. Yeah. And so when you came back, did you feel like I got this?
Yes,
like going into it?
So there are a couple things. Okay. I wasn't sure if I was going to re-audition because I was a full-time student. Okay. And it was a lot. Honestly, it was just a lot coming into. I still experienced some of that imposter syndrome, which is just like, am I really good enough to be doing this? Am I really qualified to be in this position? I mean, I really did have some of those question marks for myself. At that time, I was 20. So I was still pretty young. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think I had my 21st birthday during that year. And so I wasn't totally sure, like, is this really what I'm going to continue? So I had already had a little bit of kind of being on the fence.
A little reservation.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I went ahead. I was like, you know what? I've done a year. And I ended up switching my major. I had just made some changes to allow for that next year to be hopefully a little bit of a smoother transition instead of feeling like I was kind of like, wow, I just made this.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to be a little more strategic in just preparing myself to be more equipped for the next year.
Yeah.
And so I was more focused on like making sure that I was doing everything I needed to do to be successful and looking more like further ahead than understanding that there was a possibility of not making team, like not making it back into training camp it was where I was cut when the veterans come back to join the rookies. In some ways, I was thankful that was where that cut happened because it allowed me to kind of refocus instead of making it into training camp and then possibly being cut during that after training camp is very intense with rehearsals every evening. So if I had invested more time into that season than only to be cut, that would have been, I think, almost tougher to deal with.
Yeah.
But,
so you use this kind of as a catalyst. So you're like, okay, I didn't make it. I got cut.
And it was very difficult.
Yeah.
I said,
processing that is really, really hard after coming off that super high of like, then everybody's like, you're amazing. I want your autographs, all the stuff.
Right.
And then you're like, wait, I didn't make it back the next year. Like,
yes. It's, and I had to like come to terms with it. And it was in stages. Like it didn't all just like come to me at once, but, realizing that it was bigger than just me. The decision was not really a personal decision about me or my character, because I know some people were like, but you're so sweet, or you were such a good representative. It said very kind things to me, but at the end of the day, it really wasn't about me in that. And that I will say that's true about most of the professional ventures, is that the cuts that businesses, institutions, organizations make are most of the time not a personal decision. It's about a brand, or it's about the representation. And honestly, there were a lot of blondes. And, it's like, it's kind of what it came down to. Yeah. And maybe there were some areas where I was not as strong. And so they saw me as being maybe not the best fit for that team for that year.
For that season. Well, and that's what's cool to kind of like parse this, because it's a seasonal thing. Making the team is incredible, being a part of it, but following up requires just the same amount of effort, and sometimes if not more, because people are expecting more from a returner than they are a rookie.
Right.
Like first time ever. So, the
expectation,
it goes higher, right? So, all right. So then you took that year to kind of get yourself resituated, and then when did you decide you're like, I want to go back for it again?
Well, that year I was like, what am I going to do? I had no idea. I really had no idea. And I ended up going to study abroad, and I was in college, and I was like, this is probably the only time I'll get a chance to do this. I was in Australia for a semester, and that was such a fun experience. And especially coming off of like, not kind of like, I really don't know what to do after this kind of like major life change for me. Yeah. And so then after that, it was more of like, okay, what am I going to do? Moving ahead. I ended up graduating from college, started a corporate job after that. I was like, okay, I guess I'm going into the professional, corporate world. And then, I could not be gone for very long. And then I was
Dance
back.
just pulls you back in. It is. Once it's wrapped around your heart, it's so hard to leave.
Yes. And so getting a chance to come, and I actually subbed for the studios during that time. So, hey, Cassie, we need a sub. I'm like, I'm there. Yeah, done. I'm coming. And so I didn't stray too far in that sense. But the next time I came back to actually dancing on a team was for the Allen Americans Ice Angels. This was a mouthful. The hockey team.
Yeah.
And that was in 2015.
Okay.
And so it was 4 years after. So there was a little bit of a break, and I felt rusty for sure coming back. And so that was a really good season. And then that year I actually got engaged, and so I did 1 year with the Ice Angels, and then decided, I'm going to be married and just kind of start this chapter of my life, which was really great at that time.
Well, it's amazing because to hear how your life, like, I think that's what you're kind of alluding to in the beginning. Like, sometimes you don't get a role, but if you would have made that team the second year, you wouldn't have gone to Australia.
Right.
And all the things that you learned out there and what it did for you, which brought you back, and the connections, and ultimately down the road to, meeting your, future spouse. Like, it's crazy to think about, like, if you would have taken that setback and taken a defeated mindset, life could have looked a lot differently.
Yeah.
But instead you pivot, like, and that's like what do dancers do? Like, we pivot, we change direction, like, we make this our own. That's okay. That's not maybe exactly what I wanted, but I'm going to make it even better.
Yeah.
And I think that's what these young kids need to hear is, like, you're going to have some high highs in this type of industry. You're going to also have some real low lows.
Yeah.
And it's important that you have community and having friends that you build that support group with to help you through those moments. And now to look at, you're like, obviously we can always look back at our, like, history and be like, it all led me to here, and it feels great, if you're happy with where you're at, but there was a lot of hardship and probably, being hard on yourself.
Yes.
And no one's a bigger critic than a dancer who criticizes themselves. So, like, I want to encourage kids to, like, move towards inspiration and away from that critical mindset. Because you can have people like, wow, like, you're so amazing. And then, like you said, you can have that feeling of like, I just don't feel like I'm still giving everything, or I know I could be better.
Yeah.
And we can all be better. That's empirically true.
Right.
But that's also not the whole picture.
Yeah.
There's growth, there's development, there's times, there's seasons. And I think with dance, it's such a kaleidoscope experience.
Yeah.
That
For
each,
sure.
listening to your history, how you made a change. If you never left ballet, you never would have met jazz.
Right.
If you never met jazz, you never would have met probably Kilgore.
Right.
And drill and all the other things. And then if you never met that, you never would have gone to the Cowboys, and if you didn't do that, like, you never would have gone to Australia. So, like, how far do you want to go down the rabbit hole of, like, learning to embrace your experience to let it teach you through? And obviously, you've taught with the Dance Studio Network for so many years now, over 10 years. I mean, if you create all the times from when we started back in those early years to now, like, it's been really fun to watch is, like, how you teach and that energy that comes out of you. And so what's crazy is, like, hearing the story. There's such a seasonality to your perspective on life and dance and, like, all things in between.
Yes.
That now that is the filter and the lens that you share your life and expression through. And so how you protect the kids, you're like, I know how to protect them from things that maybe I didn't have protection from when I was younger.
Right.
Or I know to support them in ways that I didn't feel supported when I was younger.
True.
And so, like, again, it's like, instead of listing, like, everything is better or worse in your life, it's more of like, I don't know yet. Like, how is that news affecting you? Like, oh, this must be bad news. Like, I don't know yet. Let's see.
Yeah.
Let's see how it plays out.
Yeah.
And I think that resilience is required for dance, right?
And also, I know, so when I was cut from the Cowboys, a camera crew followed me out to the parking lot, and I had been crying because I was like not expecting. I mean, and I called my mom. Once I got in the car, I had called her and was like, "You won't, like, I didn't make it back." And she was just she thought, I think, that I was kidding at first too, just because she was like, "What?
Like, no way."
Yeah. And
good mom,
Yeah. Well, and but really was like, oh, like, whoa.
Okay.
And I can only imagine in her position too, like, how do you support your child in that moment, your adult child, and, in that sense, really facing this really devastating defeat. But one of the things.
Did that end up on film?
Well, not the call, not the call.
Okay. I was like, man, talk about like being under the spotlight. Like I've had bad moments, but I can't imagine like, and now let's get a closer look on how they're experiencing this, you know?
Well, the camera crew followed me out. So, they did air this of like, what kind of my final thoughts being out. And they're like, here, let's clean up your face a little bit too. I was like, this is a really good setup here. Wiping the mascara off my face before I talk. And
that's brutal.
It was.
That's brutal.
But also I felt a little bit of peace being able to say like, I don't know where the Lord is leading me next. If it's back here, I would, love that opportunity. Yeah. And if it isn't, I'll just be open to whatever is next. And I think that right there, just being open to not knowing, but being okay with not knowing, and also being okay with it, that it might be different. Yeah. Is huge, because to be a sore loser, so to speak, is not going to, it's not going to do anybody any good.
It's not going to further your development. Mm-mm. Like laying down and feeling sorry for yourself. There's a time to mourn, there's a time for sadness in your life, but let it be a catalyst to go, okay, like I've got an opportunity to turn my sadness into joy and thanksgiving and gladness for the things that I'm capable of. And I know my value, I know my worth. And I think that requires a strong mind, but you don't get a strong mind unless you experience a lot of hardship. Yeah. I'm sorry. I don't know how many people could handle like having the cameras on you, experiencing a low point. Mm-hmm. And then tell us how it feels. Like, this is fun because like we're in an agreeable situation here, but like that's really personal. Yes. And that comes with the territory, though, if you want to step into that.
And it does. And I think that, being able to channel that humility of like, man, I really don't, I don't have anything to say here that's going to be beneficial. Like, just being humble and knowing that, like, there's a bigger plan. It's hard to do, but I think, like you said, the more you are able to feel that and experience that. And like you said, when you do that, when you experience those hardships when you're younger, then it does allow you to be a little more resilient and open to what's next for me, as you continue on with the pathway. And that really goes for anything, not just dance, but just in life.
Well, it's really hard for me to separate faith from dance, because you have to believe in something before you see it. Yeah. And that's why I love, obviously people who have great faith, who are dancers. Like, it's incredible to watch that come together. And I've got to see that obviously behind the scenes over the years, because it does require that willingness to see it through. Yeah. And there's going to be setbacks. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be hard things, but like letting those things teach you along the way so you can keep growing and having the type of impact that you feel led to in this life. And that's different calling for everybody, different position for everybody. But if I'm a young person growing up in this world, and there's so much more that I have a heart for this generation, because they're growing up with social media. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you're getting a lot of mirrors put in your face to say, you need to look like this. Mm-hmm. You could look like this. You could look like that. You can behave like this. You can behave like that. And it's like hundreds and thousands, and just, it's unlimited, the amount of comparisons that are coming at you daily as a young girl, especially developing through those insecurities, through those challenges, to like really just know who you are, like to silence all these mirrors that are thrust into your life. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, when we were young and like there wasn't social media, right? It was like, I feel really good about myself. Like someone didn't, like some random stranger didn't like come up and be like, hey, by the way, someone your age is already doing this in their life. Right. And that's what like social media does.
And I just have to say it, because comparison is the thief of joy.
Absolutely.
And I am so, honestly, I'm so thankful social media wasn't a thing when I was growing up, because I would have been so insecure about so many things of myself. Even whenever I would see someone who was, like some shows like So You Think You Can Dance had started to come out once I was in high school. And even thinking like watching some of the shows and acknowledging, I I will never be that good, or
it's like, oh, and it kind of like takes the gusto out, right?
Yes. And I think staying away from those, I mean, it's so hard.
I know it's a part of life, but there's got to be a better balance.
And I think staying focused on what you're doing in the studio, what your teachers are telling you and what they're pouring into you should be the loudest influence in terms of your progress.
Oh,
Because trying to get any kind of attention or value, or even just watching, comparing across the board on social media, can be just very impactful in a negative way.
Yeah.
Whether it's comments coming towards you or things that you're feeling watching something else, that can create a kind of a spiraling effect.
Yeah. Well, and I'll be blatant. I'm a very, I've got a daughter who's turning 15, and I don't let her have social media at all. And what's been really cool is we walked her through that process when she was younger and tried to explain some of the dangers of it and the disparaging effects of feeling the fear of missing out.
Yes.
And what's crazy now is I ask her hey, how do you feel about that? And she's like, oh, I'm so glad I don't have it. Mm-hmm. She's like, I don't have any of that mess, any of that drama, any of that comparison. And I'm like, wow, it's actually really, it can be done. It's 2023. You can protect your kids from these things because this never existed before. So we don't know the long-term, effects of what it's been causing. But I'm willing to bet, based on the information and the stats in mental health and the crisis that's really facing, America for these youngsters, is if you could put away the distraction of everything telling you you're not good enough, find 5 people in your life that think you're amazing and want to see you become the best version of yourself, then welcome to dance mentorship.
Yes,
because you get years and years and years together growing up. And that's why I'm a big believer in the studio culture, because when you're a teacher, you're teaching kids from maybe 5 to 7 to 9, 10, some you can carry all the way through, and you're having a level of trust and development that's happening for both people. And when a student does something great and the teacher acknowledges that, it's validating. It's validating from a trusted source.
Yes.
When you go to the internet to look for, that validation, you better be ready, because it's going to get pretty ugly out there. You could do everything great and people are like, oh, you're dumb, you're stupid, you're not good enough. And I'm like, man, I can't imagine having to grow up trying to develop just myself, but have even more voices. And, when you went home from school, you went home, you were you're safe in your room. I'm 80s kid. So in the 90s, you go home, you put on music and you're just you get on AOL, for the first time. You're excited. You got emails, from nobody but spam, and it's a different world. But it was very, very concentrated to a very small experience. And now it's someone, the equivalent of social media is someone opening your door at home,
access,
and coming up to you and telling you you're not good enough. So kids don't need more of that.
No.
They need more focus on, again, finding people that see the value of who you are and want to see you succeed and grow, because that positive impact, it's conversely more powerful. When you have man, I was at my weakest and someone's you got this, you're going to overcome this, you're going to be better than this. Don't let this setback tear you down. You've got what it takes. Get up and go for it. Man, I guess my bones fired up and ready to go. But when someone comes in, you're awful, you're not good enough, you're oh man. And it's well, which one are you going to agree with? The fear and the doubt in your mind, or the faith and the belief? And you have to make that choice.
Well, and you could have 300 positive comments on something you're doing, and then it's going to be the one, I just don't think it's that great. I mean, it would be that one that you would just cycle through, why am I not that great?
Yeah.
And that can really, I mean, it's unfortunate how that negative feedback can really still be so loud and prevalent.
But I mean, part of dance is, again, you have a dance family. So when you're competing together with each other, you're growing and you're building bonds that are not easily broken. And that's what I love about it, is
Absolutely.
You've got your dance friends still to this day, right? Fair to say. And it's kind of you guys were shaped during a time together, and that bonded you. And that's what kids need. They need a positive bond through an experience that helps them grow as a young person into something even better than where they started. And I'm like, what better tool than dance?
Yeah.
Because you can always be better. You can always improve. You can always learn. And it's a lifelong passion for doing something you love.
Yeah.
And it changes shape and form over the years from when you're young to, you get married and you have kids and you become a mom, and like it looks different and it changes different, but it's something that is the anchor point that brings people together from generation to generation. And that's why I think we have to preserve and protect this next one coming up to remind them like, hey, there's certain traditions in this industry for a reason. It's to protect you. It's to support you.
Yeah.
If you want to get online and look for validation from social media, you might find a lot more emptiness than you find fulfillment. And so again, get in the studio, get to work, find those mentors. I'm going to keep saying it. Find those mentors that want to believe in you and support you and help you reach your goals. And that's what I think, as far as the Dance Studio Network sums up for us in my mind, is like building bridges of opportunity where kids, where, artists collectively can collaborate to support each other and do life together.
Yeah.
And being in the dance world, how much time do you spend outside of dance doing life together? Like with some of those friends and people that you've met in the dance world.
Well, a lot.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like,
my kids play with other dancers' kids.
Yeah.
And so,
it's powerful.
The community is, it's definitely there. And you want to have that. I mean, you so want to have that, when you're navigating through kind of, and with dance being subjective too, somebody might love what you're doing and somebody might be like, I don't really get it, or I don't really, see the value of that.
And that's art. Like art is subjective.
Exactly. And
like,
so,
I like this painting. Well, I don't like it. Okay. Well, which is right? Which one's wrong?
And so I think that's,
preference.
And that's honestly one of the things that I do like about dance is that it doesn't have to be any certain way. Now, there are technical skills to build on, but the artistry element, like it's art built off of, a discipline.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting and cool to see how that looks from Frisco to Allen to McKinney, looks different, just even from the three studios.
From city to city. Yeah.
So
I think there's, it's a very powerful element that you really tapped into there. And again, it comes down to like the community of people that you choose to do life with, who share the same passions, the interests, the tenacity as you, that has the opportunity to propel you. And again, conversely, the opposite. If you don't surround yourself with the right people, the right type of teachers, the right type of, extracurriculars, whatever it is you're choosing to do out there, it can affect you negatively for the worse.
Yeah.
And I think that's, what I've loved watching you is like dancers get inspired. Their passion grows whenever they're around you. And I think unlike a lot of things you can do in this life, and, the corporate world is so different than the artistic world, right? It's like we are so far apart, but borrowing some elements of consistency and development and processing and all that stuff can still lead you into that life. And that's a beautiful life to have. But if you are lucky enough to choose a lifelong passion for artistry, you get a type of freedom that not a lot of people know on the day-to-day basis. The way you think, the way you problem solve, the way you adjust and fine tune, the way you see things, the way you hear things, like it really transforms you as a person.
Yeah.
And to me, like that's what I love about dance is, like you said, no journey's the same.
Right.
And the only thing I can guarantee you when you go through dance is it's going to be one heck of an experience, what you're going to learn and what you're going to learn about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, gosh, well, we're coming to the end here. So I want to give you one more shot at this as far as, advice for the next generation coming up, for the students. Like, what would you say to your younger self?
Well, I mentioned it earlier, but just don't get hung up on any specific pathway. There's a lot of ways to be successful with dance.
Yeah.
And it's going to look different. It's going to look different from anybody else. Your pathway will look different. Your achievements or successes, and success is relative too, but your successes will come quicker in some ways, and then may go slower in other ways. And so, that comparison being the thief of joy, get rid of it so that you can stay focused on really what abundance lies ahead of you.
I love it. Well, I'll pin it on that one. So embrace the journey, y'all. That is a wonderful experience. Cassie, thank you for joining us on the show. This has been incredible. And again, there's so much more we can dive into. We'll have to have you come back another time. But thank you all for tuning in today to the Dance Studio Network podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Chatham. And until next time, let's see where the journey takes you in the wonder that is dance. Yes. We'll see you soon.